Hi, I'm Bruce W. Paulik, science fiction author. Today I'm actually going to narrate the first chapter of Mindfall Inception, an epic space opera, my debut uh, novel in this Empire of the Mind series. Right, chapter one, Death at the Arena, Conley. Conley Doohan, Knight of the Empire and Dux of the Year 634 graduating cohort, stepped from the shuttle into the heat of both suns. The all-encompassing sound of trumpets calling the faithful to prayer and service to the one true God made the hairs stand up on his forearms. As with most knights exiting the shuttle, the immense cenotaph of the fallen looming over them just a few meters away captured his gaze. The cenotaph, its white marble spire seeming to disappear into the wispy clouds, paid homage to the sentinels, both knights and guardians, who had fallen in service to the Empire. Beyond the cenotaph, the proof of faith arena thrust itself from the black marble surrounding it, buttressed by columns of black marble reaching skyward. Conley found the jet black marble somber and forbidding, but today it also glowed with a blue light, adding a sense of occasion. Emblazoned over every entrance in man-high letters, lit from within by gold light, were the words, "One God, one faith, one empire." How many times had he seen those words embossed over the entrance of imperial buildings in the empire? The sentiment was starting to wear a bit thin. The arena would hold close to 250,000 citizens of the empire on this day, the first day of January in the 635th year of the one true God, as it did on the first day of every year. The marble areas on this side of the arena catered to the shuttles delivering military participants or VIPs. All other civilians entered the arena through underground Gravlev stations that disgorged them onto the other side of the arena. There, the overpowering black marble of the arena and the spire of the cenotaph could elicit suitable awe before they reached an entrance. A steady stream of shuttles in the gold colours and insignia of the Imperial Academy of Knights delivered hundreds of knights to the arena. The Empire bestowed this honour on knights who had earned military awards in battle over the preceding year and on the top graduates of the Academy of Knights training program. And Conley had topped them all. He proudly wore the uniform of the revered knights of the Empire, the officers of the Sentinel Force, sworn to protect the Empire's citizens. The exhaust blasts and fumes from the shuttles combined with the midday heat of both suns to make disembarking unpleasant. But swept up in the pomp and ceremony of the occasion, Conley paid no heed to the conditions. The knights, dressed in their formal gold uniforms trimmed with the colour of their rank, marched five abreast from each shuttle to an entrance of the arena. Conley, top graduate of his battalion, led one company of graduate knights. Indra Hughes and Tarana Pleiades, his closest friends and fellow top graduates, marched on either side of him. Rhiann Jamison, top graduate of her battalion, led the other company of graduates. Although bright-eyed and eager, the graduate knights maintained a quiet and solemn demeanour as they entered the arena. For most of the knights and citizens of the Empire, attending the annual proving would be a once-in-a-lifetime event. As this occurred to him, Conley had an almost overwhelming premonition that this would be the only time the Empire would ever present him with an award. Upon entering the foyer, Conley and a group of 20 knights boarded a high-speed transport capsule to be whisked away to their seating. Conley watched the discomfort of some of his fellow graduates with amusement. Surely their brutal training exercise could have cured any tendency to claustrophobia or motion sickness. Tirana, standing beside him, merely winked at Conley and Indra, but kept her thoughts to herself. Once seated, Conley found himself at the same level as Emperor Saraxian's throne. Further around the curve of the arena, on the other side of the throne, Rianne sat with her company of graduates. As Conley found her in the sea of gold uniforms, Rianne turned her head to him. Not here, and not now. Rianne had directed this thought on what they called their private line. Conley gave a nearly imperceptible nod and focused on soaking up the activity in the vast arena. The trumpets had begun playing the Imperial March, foreshadowing the start of the ceremony in 30 minutes. Conley already had a headache from the ear-splitting volume of the trumpets, so he dialed back the volume on his audio implants. Thank the one true God that at least implants to correct hearing and sight damage were legal in the Empire. While the military participants in the audience sat with only murmurs passing between them, the civilians at first laughed and joked without a care, but an underlying sense of dread made this frivolity seem forced. The adults-only audience sported its finest formal wear, with an astonishing variety of costumes from 1,000 planets across the Empire. High-fashion costumes were encouraged for this event, which celebrated another year of Emperor Saraxian's reign as divine leader of the Church of the One True God and vigilant guardian of all God's creatures. Emperor Saraxian had presided over a 632-year golden era for the Empire, with wealth and security, at least for the lucky, being a hallmark of the 6 centuries since the end of the war against the ungodly. Celebrations of this event would carry on for several days after the ceremony, here on Luxor and across the Empire. The Empire subsidized these celebrations as a reminder of the rewards for being a loyal citizen and devout follower of the one true God. The proceedings at this event were a reminder of the alternative. The audience packed the arena, with multiple cameras sending the proceedings live to the Emperor's 990 billion subjects across the major population centers on 1,000 planets in the inhabited arm of the galaxy. Another few billion citizens in small communities on hundreds of other planets would watch the recording later. Failure to watch the annual proving attracted punishment by indeterminate periods in rehabilitation work camps on remote worlds. The Emperor's defenders of the faith checked the compliance of every citizen of the Empire with fanatical zeal. Arena seating meant every person would have a view of the raised throne behind the dais and events on the floor of the arena, the proving ground. Massive floating screens at several vantage points around the periphery would show close-up images of the Emperor and the proceedings on the proving ground. To earn an invitation to the annual proving was a great honor, and only bestowed on those who had proved themselves important to the Empire and devout members of the Church of the One True God. For those invited, the Empire would pay the expenses of travel to Luxor and from every far-flung planet. On the flip side, knowing that congregation members could be a target today and pay for breaking religious law, even with their lives, instilled anxiety and dread in the audience. Every attendee would cast their thoughts back over the past year or two, searching for any religious misdemeanor that the defenders of the faith might class as heresy, for only heresy would result in summary execution. The floating screens around the arena displayed random close-ups of faces as audience members took their seats, spending no more than 10 seconds on each person. Once a citizen noticed a screen showing their face, the level of anxiety they exhibited skyrocketed. That person probably suspected the Empire had chosen them for execution. A stately woman, holding herself erect and proud, wearing the national dress of a distant planet of the Empire, burst into tears when she appeared on the screen for almost 20 seconds. Connolly found the whole process cruel and unnecessary. The overall tension in the arena grew. The voices became more subdued. Many were sitting motionless. Did they believe not speaking and sitting still prevented them from being charged with heresy? Connolly couldn't deny that he too was affected by the idea of being charged with heresy. The hairs on his forearms rose at the thought. At a shrill blast from the trumpets, the force field closing off the roof of the arena darkened, no longer passing the light of the suns. The arena dimmed to black. Then a high floating platform lit with a soft gold light exposed Empress Xanthi, dressed in gold and black ceremonial robes, and flanked by 12 bishops dressed in deep red robes and headdress. The floating screens displayed close-up images of them as the audience broke into applause. The lighting dimmed to black again, and the trumpets began a spine-tingling wailing, which deepened to a note that Connolly felt as a breathtaking vibration throughout his body. The trumpet note ended with an abrupt single beat of drums. A deathly silence settled over the arena. Emperor Seraxian appeared at the front edge of the floating platform, bathed in brilliant gold light, dressed in ceremonial black and gold robes and an elaborate gold mask and headdress. The congregation burst into thunderous applause, encouraged by defenders of the faith placed at strategic points around the arena. The audience began chanting in unison, "One God, one Emperor." The applause and chanting continued for several minutes until the Emperor crossed his forearms with clenched fists across his chest, one fist holding the ornate golden rod of power. When the arena was silent again, he stretched his arms out to the sides, as if embracing his congregation. In this silence, two bishops moved forward and lifted the gold mask from the Emperor's head. The only time in the year when the Emperor would show his face to the citizens of the Empire. The Emperor lowered his arms and gave a small bow to his subjects to deafening applause and chanting. Connolly dutifully joined in with the chanting with the other knights, but felt hypocritical given his misgiving about Emperor Seraxian campaign against telepaths. The platform floated down to the arena floor. A palpable quiet settled over the arena, as if all 250,000 citizens were holding their breath. The Emperor and the Empress, separated by 2 meters, strolled across the proving ground, followed at intervals by 12 bishops, also separated by 2 meters. As the final 2 bishops reached the center of the floor, one of them froze, transfixed in place, struggling to move. Terror etched across his face. Connolly also froze in place, suspecting what would come next. The other bishop continued to walk across the floor as plasma beams erupted around the transfixed bishop, who emitted a shrill scream before his body blackened, then turned to ash. The audience broke into cries of horror and dismay. They had not expected one of their bishops to fall victim to the plasma beams. Connolly remained quiet, his face rigid, not quite believing what he'd just seen. It had been 17 years since any of this group of emperor, empress, and bishops fell afoul of the plasma beams. That had been even more shocking. The empress herself had turned to ash, but not before reaching out one arm to the emperor, screaming, then turning into a blackened corpse and disintegrating, ending as a cloud of ash wafted upwards by the rising hot air. Most horrifying, her outstretched hand and fingers curling into a tight fist, being the last to turn to charred remains, then ultimately ash. On this day, the emperor, empress, and the remaining 11 bishops arose on the platform to the throne level. Empress Xanthi and the bishops, stricken and unsteady, moved to sit in large formal chairs arranged behind the throne. Emperor Seraxian turned to the audience. Close-up images of his somber face broadcast on every screen. A brilliant gold hue lit the emperor, while the empress and bishops were lit in red and the audience remained in darkness. The audience fell quiet, waiting, still shocked at the loss of their favourite bishop. The emperor's deep voice thundered throughout the arena. Tragically, today we have lost Bishop Quervain. I cannot yet tell you how he sinned against the one true God. I can only tell you we will investigate his life and actions to find the cause of his demise. In the interim, we acknowledge and celebrate his achievements in life. Today, we also ask the one true God to pass judgment on two of our citizens. As the emperor gestured towards the proving ground, a brilliant spotlight exposed two figures standing erect at its edge. A boy and a girl, both perhaps in their late teens, with their heads shaved, wore the thin striped robes of convicted heretics. The rigidity of their posture revealed that a force field held them in place, their faces registering the terror they felt. Conley imagined a scene where he and Rianne were held rigid, wearing the heretic's robes. A coldness crept through his entire body. As every citizen of the Empire knows, using telepathy or claiming the ability is a heresy punishable by painful death. Likewise, concealing or aiding one of these heretics is a heresy. Our devout and loyal defenders of the faith have investigated and brought before us two citizens who have been claiming the power of telepathy and using it to intimidate and defraud others. We have found them guilty of heresy. As they cross the proving ground today, should the one true God find fault with their conviction or decide to show mercy, they will survive the passage. Heretics, the emperor's deep voice thundered throughout the arena. Take heed. Your only chance of survival is to walk across the proving ground and let the one true God decide your fate. Failure to comply will mean instant death. The force field was released and the young man sank to his knees. The young woman sagged but pulled herself erect, head high, staring at the emperor. Rising gradually, the young man cast around, seeking an escape route. He darted backwards as if to run from the proving ground, but a 5,000-degree plasma beam engulfed his screaming form before he had taken 2 paces. Unwavering, the young woman kept her eyes locked on the emperor. She spread her arms out wide to the sides, fingers extended, and trudged forward, glaring at him. As she reached the midpoint, a plasma beam fired from the floor, surrounding her body, except for her outstretched hands. Every screen in the arena showed all of this in vivid color. She died without a murmur, with only the clenching of her fists to indicate her agony. But her thoughts had blasted out across the arena for all able to hear, and Conley had heard every nuance, as he knew Rianne, Indra, and Traiana would also have. Her thoughts spoke of pain beyond imagination, but they also held an undertone of anger at the Empire and a sense of betrayal by comrades who were meant to protect her. Within moments, only a small off-white ash cloud wafting across the proving ground showed she had ever existed. An intense quiet settled on the audience. Conley and Rianne stared at each other, white-faced but not sharing thoughts. Emperor Syraxian's voice once more reverberated throughout the stadium. The one true God now calls upon me to scan all who are present in this arena for any sign of heresy. Be still and quiet while I perform this solemn and holy act. Conley had to stop himself from snorting in disbelief. Another piece of theatre. He did not believe the Emperor could scan for telepaths. Stadium lights dimmed, and the roof's force field remained opaque to sunlight. A gold light seemed to radiate from the Emperor, initially warm but increasingly harsh and dazzling. His gaze swung around the arena, and the gold light beamed out across section after section of the audience. After a few moments of high tension, the beam became stationary and went from highlighting a section of the stadium to focusing on one particular person, a middle-aged woman, sobbing, holding her face in her hands. An audible intake of breath rose from the gathered citizens, both in shock for the woman and in relief the gold light had not targeted them. The woman floated up from her seat, her body rigid and arched backwards. The folds of her purple gown flowed behind her as she drifted across the arena and touched ground none too gently in the center of the proving ground. She collapsed to her knees and sagged forward to bury her face into her hands again. The all-knowing one true God has indicated that this woman hid and protected her daughter, whom you have just seen executed for the heretic crime of telepathy. Only the one true God can decide if mercy should be shown in this case. The tractor beam picked up the woman, then carried her at speed to place her at the edge of the proving ground, but her legs folded beneath her as soon as she was released. Again she was lifted and held vertically, the tractor beam wafting her across the proving ground. The entire audience held its breath until she reached the far side without incident, and the tractor beams released her into the arms of two waiting attendants. Praise to the one true God for demonstrating his mercy in sparing this woman, who had, in seeking to protect her daughter, committed the sin of heresy. For to protect an individual who is a known heretic is also a crime against the one true God. Praise to the one true God, for he is both just and merciful. The audience in unison responded, Praise to the one true God. The congregation settled in for the presentation of a handful of major awards, and Conley, his eyes blazing with anger and his face rigid, sought out Rianne, Indra, and Tirana amongst the knights. They would all need to come to terms with this dark side of the Empire. Conley had always believed the Emperor and the Empire existed to protect its citizens, and he had loved the Empire. But now he saw the reality of its determination to destroy all telepaths. And beyond that, the reality of the extreme danger to Rhiannon himself. He would stop at nothing to protect Rhiannon from the cruelty and brutality of the Emperor and his black shirts. But ultimately, that could pit him against the Empire. But for the moment, he had to compose himself to face the Emperor and receive his medal. The several minutes it would take to reach the platform would be vital for him to muster an expression devoid of hate. Conley walked the deep purple carpet across the dais to the Emperor. The Emperor's eyes never left him. Conley bowed deeply as was expected of him. He believed that the Emperor would simply step forward and affix the medal to his uniform. But the Emperor broke with protocol and extended his hand to Conley. After a second's hesitation, Conley reciprocated and reached out for the handshake that broke with all tradition. The Emperor had an iron grip and did not relinquish Conley's hand for some moments as he looked deep into the knight's eyes. Conley felt the brush of a mind seeking entrance to his thoughts. Conley and his friends had trained to repel this precise mental intrusion. His barrier against the intruding thoughts held firm as the Emperor released his hand, pinned the medal on Conley's uniform, and turned away without speaking a single word. In the name of the one true God, what was all that about? Was that the Emperor attempting to invade his mind, or was it someone else? Perhaps one of the bishops? Was the Emperor a telepath? Yet the Emperor was determined to murder every telepath in the Empire. This day that Conley had received his Knight Exemplar award from Emperor Seraxian was also the day that sparked his hatred of this holy empire. Well, thank you. That's chapter 1. And the tone changes somewhat after that. Thank goodness. That's pretty heavy. But if you read um, Mindful Inception. I hope you enjoy the story. Thank you.